everybody, this is Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome back to the Kratch Really Picked Rutgers to Beat Wisconsin podcast. I'm joined, as always, by the aforementioned James Kratch, not taking him to Vegas anytime soon, and Keith Sargent. And I wanted to start with what I saw at the end of the game. And I wasn't there this week, watching it on BTN. They could have not been more effusive about the progress from this team. And you know, any objective observer would have to agree that these last two performances are, of course, far better than what we saw from this team a month ago. Here's my question. Here's my problem and my question to you guys. You know, when you bury the bar 10 feet below the ground like they did against Kansas and Buffalo, you know, it's pretty easy to clear. So anything that they do that looks like a competent football team at this point is good. So I guess my question is, do you measure the progress from where they started the season, or do you measure the progress from last season? I mean, Sarge, what do you think? Are we right to say, hey, look, the team looks better now, or is it kind of a hollow thing based on how bad they were early on?
Yeah, kind of hollow because, I mean, I think, you know, once they lost to Buffalo and Kansas, you know, that really left a sour taste in everyone's mouths, and that was pretty much the season. When we look back at, you know, at the end of November when the season ends, whether it's 1-11 or somehow, some way they beat a Michigan State to go finish 2-10, we're going to look back on those two games as the point where the season was a failure. I kind of looked at it, and I get the fact that it was a 14-point final score, but to me that Wisconsin was in control from start to finish. I mean, they scored on the first drive, and you know they just never looked back. They ran the ball. They did everything they really wanted to do. I think they averaged 7 yards per clip during the bulk of that game. On the ground, they were able to establish their will. And to me, even though it was a 31-17 final score, some window dressing at the end for Rutgers offense, to me, Wisconsin dominated that game.
Right. And they couldn't, I mean, window dressing, I guess, for this team is progress because they couldn't, obviously when you throw for 8 yards against Maryland, you know, and the fact they threw for 260 is something. Kratch, and I think I was interested, you had a different perspective on this. You thought this was a game that, you know, they could have won beforehand, and during even what was happening in this game, you thought they had a chance. I mean, what's your perspective on this?
That's exactly why. I mean, when I picked Rutgers to win, part of it was just because, hey, I'd been talking for months about how I thought they could be competitive with Wisconsin. I thought it was a surprisingly good matchup for them, so I just figured, with a little bit of your pushing, Steve,
a little bit, just a little bit. Text. I wasn't going to let you stand on that edge. I was going to push you off that edge.
I figured, just go for it. Yeah. That being said, yeah, I truly believe I was there in Madison. In the first half, the conditions were ripe had Rutgers been able to capitalize for them to potentially win that football game. I mean, I understand that Wisconsin's banged up. I understand that they threw 2 interceptions. I get all that. That's the point. The point is that for whatever reason, all those factors came together and it gave a situation for Rutgers where they had a legitimate, realistic chance. I'm not saying it was a great chance. Maybe it was only 25%, but they had a puncher's chance to beat the Wisconsin Badgers in Camp Randall Stadium had they just made a play.
Yes.
And they couldn't do it. And I think that's why you need to – I think Rutgers fans should be disappointed. You had a chance for a win that would have gone into program lore, and you just couldn't do anything about it.
I love Angry Kratch. And you point out the play and you know, the trademark surrender punt. And that's funny. At the time, I kind of was like, well, you know, I think I'm so beaten down. It's like, oh, it's 10-0. That's not bad, you know. But you made a great play. They're on the Wisconsin 44. It's 4th and 7. I mean,
you're 1-7. Like you're 1-7. Who cares if Wisconsin goes up 17-0? Like, does it really matter at that point? Like, you're 1-7. Your offense has 62 yards total in its first 5 series. Now you've got 48 yards on this drive. You've got a 3rd and 7 from the Wisconsin 44 with under 2 minutes to go. You call timeout. I do not understand how Rutgers could not be thinking we're in 2-down territory, or we're going to do this, or maybe we're going to finally let Adam Korsak's been teasing that kind of roll to his right, take off and run, fake punt, where this is the moment to do it. I mean, what are you guys waiting for? Like, you saving that one for Michigan? Like, that's not going to do any difference.
Right.
Like, this was a game, for whatever reason, this was a game where Rutgers had a chance to do something. And I think if I was Chris Ash, my thought process would be, we are getting points on this drive come hell or high water. Whether we get 3, whether we get 7, whatever. We are getting points. And then remember, Rutgers is getting the ball to start the second half. You go in the locker room, you tell them, like, hey, guys, we're going to get the ball. We're going to go down the field and score, and we're going to take the lead. Whether we go ahead by a touchdown or we go for 2 after the touchdown, I don't care. We are taking the lead. And if you suddenly are tied with or leading Wisconsin after your first drive of the second half, they have to be honest on offense. They have to keep playing, and they have to mix the run and the pass. And they've got a backup quarterback in Jack Cohn now who they're even less confident in. I just thought and the whole idea of, you're trying to play field position. I mean, one, who cares? As I said, if you're down 17-0, the game's over anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. But two, you just let this big, gigantic Wisconsin offensive line tee off on your defensive line for 5 more plays at the end of the half.
Right.
And run their time of possession up to 17 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it's like, why let them put more body blows in? Because that's what happened. Rutgers got worn down in the second half because Wisconsin was able to say, hey, we got a 10-point lead. We can just hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor. So, I mean, yes, once the second half began, Rutgers didn't have a chance to win. But the chance was there to take the game to the fourth quarter in the first half. And I just thought the punt there, I mean, what are you accomplishing by punting?
It really was a surrender punt. The more you talk about it, but I guess, looking from what the offense had done to that point, I sort of get it, but go for the jugular. Why not? You're 1-7. The bigger problem though, Cratch, and I wrote about this, and I mean, it was obvious before the game started, when you can't stop the run at all, when you've given up 300 yards on the ground, and it wasn't, they could have run for, 800 yards. I mean, it's just one of those games where, I mean, they just don't have any, the linebackers were bad. The defensive line was overwhelmed. Sorry, Jonathan Taylor you wrote about him. He has 4 yards. He has 4 yards before he gets the ball. He's like, you could have had 200 yards in that game. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And the funny thing is I did write about it, and I had a couple of Rutgers fans say, oh, well, I could run behind that offensive line, which maybe you could. But by that same token, it's not like Rutgers hasn't had an opportunity to bolster and improve his offensive line through recruiting, and they're nowhere near that. So, and not too many schools are, but to say that Jonathan Taylor, who was a one-time Rutgers commit, was committed to Chris Ash for 6 months almost, and he's leading the country in rushing for the second straight year. Just an incredible player, and one of those many who got away.
Right. And that said, Rutgers did have a good running back itself this game. And we kind of were all three of us were on the Pacheco train. But Raheem Blackshear showed, in the passing game, especially, why he is the most valuable player on the offense. Cratch, where were these screens? I mean, was it just not the opportunity wasn't there? Where were these short pass plays that, put the ball in his hand weeks ago?
I think it's got to be partly opportunity. I just look back at a lot of these games, Ohio State, Kansas, Buffalo, Illinois. Like, Rutgers has fallen behind so much that I just think that they've kind of retreat into survival mode as an offense, especially when they keep on turning the ball over. The past 2 weeks, Rutgers hasn't turned the ball over. Art Sikowski has played incredibly clean. I mean, think about it. It's like Rutgers has won a turnover battle the last 2 weeks and hasn't turned the ball over at all themselves, and they're still 0-2. So I thought it was a very creative game plan by John McNulty, but I also think that for the first time in a while, they were in a scenario where they weren't necessarily they were kind of able to run their offense efficiently and kind of get deeper into the playbook. But at the same time, I mean, Wisconsin's up 24-3 basically with a minute to go in the third quarter. I think it would be naive to claim that they didn't back off a little bit.
Right. Well, and to your point, Sikowski, since the 8-yard day against Maryland, 35 for 70, all right, 50%, 342 yards, a touchdown, and no interceptions, which, I mean, if you had told us that a couple weeks ago, the way he was throwing the ball, and granted, Wisconsin dropped a couple, but still, I mean, that's a clean slate. That's improvement from him, at least. You can say that he is certainly getting better.
It is, and I think this is going to be a big test this week because if the Sikowski of a couple of weeks ago is probably looking at another like 4 or 5 interception game. I think John McNulty mentioned today at the press conference, we're taping this on a Monday, the idea that if he can get through another game without a turnover, I mean, I think that's going to be asking a lot based on this Michigan defense. But if at the end of the game on Saturday, it's like, okay, well, Sikowski completed 50% of his passes and he only threw 1 interception or something, and it was kind of a coverage interception, I think you'd say, okay, the progress is being made. I think the big key for him is you don't want to have him regress back to a Kansas or Maryland-esque performance. And I think that's going to be tough. That's going to be a challenge because this Michigan defense is kind of otherworldly.
Sarge, your thoughts? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking baby steps, right? I mean, you know, this we kind of asked, I asked John McNulty and I asked Chris Ash about this Michigan team being a historic defense, and you know, I watched I watched the bulk of that Penn State game the other day. You know, that defense is phenomenal. You know, Michigan's defense ranks first in the country in almost every meaningful stat, especially total yards given up. Rutgers is third from the bottom in total yards gained. So, I mean, this is as big of a mismatch, at least on paper, as I can remember.
All right, let's hop right into true or false, shall we? Let's do it. All right, you know what's coming, and it's interesting because we've gone 11 minutes without talking about the job status of the head coach, but true or false? If Rutgers goes 1-11 and gets absolutely destroyed in the final 3 games in front of tens of thousands of opposing fans, Chris Ash gets fired. True or false?
False.
False. Where's the percentage? Are we down to 0 yet? Are we still in the teens? 2? What do we think? I mean, what?
Yeah, I'm down to about 1%.
1%. Cratch.
I'll say 3%.
I'm still going to leave it in the 10 to 12 range just because crazy stuff happens. All right, true or false? This is the game that convinced you Art Sikowski is going to be a very good college quarterback. True or false? Anybody?
I'm going to say false just because I think I've felt that even through some of the struggles. I think it wasn't like this was an eye-opener for me in any way.
Okay. Sarge?
Yeah, I know what Cratch is saying. I mean, I there was that one pass that he threw to Blackshear where Blackshear caught it and then tiptoed, you know, down the yard, down the sideline. That was just an NFL type throw.
Yeah.
But kind of like what Cratch said. I mean, he's shown me some signs, especially the last couple of weeks. But you know, even in I've never not said that he's going to be a really good quarterback. So I guess by the definition, I'll say false.
I think I go true just because I love when he took that hit. I think it's just an incredible hit and still managed to hit Volacek, whatever his name is, the tight end. Thank you. On third down to me that was a, hey, there's your guy kind of moment. But the accuracy still leaves me a little bit. Then I tweeted this. I wish we had seen him with good blocking and one reliable wide receiver. It would have been a completely different thing, I think, but we obviously haven't. All right, true or false? John McNulty called his best game of the season against Wisconsin.
True.
False.
False. Wow. Okay. True or false? Linebacker play is a major problem for this team now.
True.
True, and it's been a while. It's been, they might have had a little glimpse, last season when the linebacker play wasn't terrible, but this is probably going on 5 of the last 6 years. The linebacker play has been horrendous.
And the disappointment, because I thought that was going to be a position of strength. True or false? Greg Schiano. Whoa. Greg Schiano is the worst possible Maryland coaching search outcome for Rutgers.
False.
Okay. Sarge?
True.
What is the worst possible coaching search outcome then, Cratch?
It's that Maryland hires Paul Johnson, Ken Niumatalolo, or Jeff Monken.
Okay. All right.
Someone at some point is going to have the guts, some athletic director, to run the Flexbone, to bring the triple option to a Power 5 conference, to a program that is not accomplishing anything otherwise. And if it's Maryland, I think that's bad news for Rutgers because I'm telling you, Maryland would be able to go out there if they committed to that system and find the athletes to go win 6, 7, 8, 9 games. And that's not what Rutgers needs. Is it looks at a rebuild that probably realistically has got a year or 2 more left, if that,
right.
If not more.
True or false? Michigan won't score more than 40 points on Saturday.
False.
Okay. Sarge?
I'm going to say true. I just Cratch and I were talking about it, and I think Michigan has, they're laser focused on the 2 weeks after this, especially the finale against Ohio State. They're going to get up comfortably, and I think they're going to just win convincingly. I don't know if they get to 40.
Wow. Sorry. Okay, then this one's for you, Cratch. True or false? Michigan won't score more than 50 points on Saturday.
True.
then you're ruining my last one, which of course is true or false. Michigan won't score 78 points. At the very least, they're not going to score 78 points. True. Okay, we got that checked off.
Yeah.
And finally, true or false? Michigan has a real shot to win the national championship this year.
True.
I think so too. And it's funny. If you're the team that's going to beat Alabama, assuming they get in and have a chance to play Alabama, is going to have a great defense. And I mean, watching that game, that is not a good defense. That is a great defense, that I've been against Penn State. I mean, I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but I mean,
100%.
Yeah. I mean,
totally agree with you.
That's what it's going to take. You need a defense that's going to slow Alabama down. It's going to keep it to be a close game. And then, that's the only way you're going to have a shot. So.
Well, I think the real key of this whole thing is going to be, assuming Notre Dame goes 12-0 and gets in, does Michigan get the 4 seed if they win the Big Ten, or they get the 3 seed? Because then you could have Alabama. Alabama-Michigan might be the national title game in the semifinal.
Wow. Yeah, in that scenario, Michigan's going to go behind Notre Dame. Notre Dame being head-to-head, and if it's between those two.
I think Michigan's a better team, but obviously they lost that game at the beginning of the year. I mean, I feel like if Michigan,
I've heard that, but Notre Dame, and I get it, but Notre Dame has a better quarterback than they had week 1.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true. I guess my point is, I think if Michigan is playing Alabama on a 1 week turnaround, I think that's a great game.
That would be fun.
But if Saban's got a month to get ready for the game, I think that kind of negates maybe a little bit for Michigan. I still think Clemson at the end of the day is the team that has the best chance to beat Alabama, just because of the defensive line and just because they are not afraid of Alabama.
Right.
I'm not saying Michigan is, but Clemson, they've looked the tide in the eye many times. So, I think Michigan is but that being said, I still think there's a very good chance that Michigan is going to look like, the 85 Bears, and then they're going to lose to Ohio State, because I don't know if Jim Harbaugh can beat Urban Meyer when it counts.
Well, that's going to be a fascinating game too. All right, let's talk about Rutgers, Michigan. And I was thinking about this, and I'm going to write about this this week, guys. It just doesn't seem possible that it was only 4 years ago that Rutgers beat this team. I mean, I was there. I was sitting in the press box. Just the idea of the direction that these two programs have gone since, to me, is almost incredible. I mean, not only did Rutgers beat Michigan, but 400 yards of passing offense. They were even in the trenches for the most part. I mean, it's just incredible what's happened since. And we obviously know the answer to both, the direction they've gone. But I mean, when you look at Michigan now, comparatively to, is there one thing compared to Rutgers that you see that you're like, wow, that's the difference between these two programs?
I think the difference is a couple things. One, I remember I took a lot of heat for it, because I remember writing about Michigan and how many 4- and 5-star recruits they had going into that game. But I think we saw a Michigan team that was so poorly coached.
Yeah.
If you remember, Brady Hoke. There were questions going into that game about him playing a kid who was clearly concussed.
Oh, I remember that
the week before. That was the whole reason why they implemented some of these concussion protocol, throughout the Big Ten, throughout college football. And they had a quarterback who was, highly flawed. And I think Rutgers had one of their best teams, certainly of this decade. And they had some really good skill position guys, headed up by Gary Nova, who was an experienced quarterback who played, great that game. So,
yep.
And the atmosphere was electric, and you put together a couple really game-defining plays by Kamoko Toure, and you had the recipe for what I still, in my mind, consider one of the bigger upsets in Rutgers history.
Rutgers had the better coach in that game, but it was Ralph Friedgen. Yes. I think that we can give Kyle Flood a lot of grief for many, many, many things, but he recognized he needed to have a stellar X's and O's coach on his sideline, And he went out and got one of the best, available in the country. And, I think what he did that game with Gary Nova, and it wasn't, this was not the great collection of Rutgers skill players. Remember, if you look at John Tisman, you look at some of the guys who were catching passes.
Yep.
Yeah. It wasn't like Leonte Carew and these guys starring. It was really a bunch of guys that, didn't really go on to have pro careers. So that was fridge.
I wasn't covering a team. I wasn't at the game. I remember watching it on television. I think it was my last year covering high schools. But the one thing I always thought was that's Rutgers, their first ever Big Ten home game. And credit to the Big Ten for sending Michigan in. You have that atmosphere, and it's just now it's almost like the Rutgers fan base is kind of beaten down. I think there should be a sense of excitement in the idea that the number 4 team in the country is coming to Piscataway, and you're playing with house money. You've got your shot at them. You could, if Rutgers were to somehow beat with Michigan, and obviously that's not going to happen, they would it would detonate a bomb in the center of the college football universe. Everyone would be talking about Rutgers. And it's I was even kind of taken aback by Chris Ash today in his press conference. Your team has played 2 good teams from the West. Northwestern's probably going to win the division. You've been respectable. You played them tough. Sell the excitement. I know he says he's worried about his team and themselves, but this is a moment that you have this team. They're coming to your stadium, and Michigan probably looks at Rutgers as just kind of a speed bump on the way to the Ohio State game. But this is a one-game season potentially for Rutgers. I think you make the argument that Rutgers is going to play 3 one-game seasons to finish out this year. And I just don't sense any buzz about that. I think 78-0 has something to do with it. Obviously 1-8 has something to do with it. But just seize the moment. This, you got house money. Just let it all kind of hang out and see what happens.
Why is he not? It's his personality, Sarge. I don't know. He's never been a salesman, but why would Nash? I don't know.
One quick correction, because I know our 2 listeners are gonna correct us on it. But the Penn State game that year, Cratch was the.
You're right.
The first
I'm sorry.
game. No, that's okay. We're just gonna you hear from both Dave White and. Probably, or one other listener. So I just don't want to get flooded with those emails. But to answer,
I apologize, guys.
That's okay. You're quite okay. But to answer Politi's question, I think that's kind of his personality. We were talking about it offline, and I kind of put up a softball. We're to the point this year where we're not analyzing this game. Let's be honest. So we spend the Monday press conference. We're on the eve of a pretty significant anniversary in Rutgers history. If anyone knows me, I do tend to write some historical pieces. Where tomorrow is going to be the 149th anniversary of the first game. So I asked him a softball. It's just basically, is it something that you talk about with recruits? It's something that Pat Hobbs is very proud of. He's on the committee to celebrate the 150th anniversary. I know they're doing a lot of big things, and tomorrow is basically the beginning of a 1-year celebration of it, right? So his answer, put it to you this way. He could not have been more dismissive of a question if I would have asked him if you coached the game in ladies' underwear. He really did not want any part of it. His answer, I'll just quote him verbatim, was because I asked him, is it something that you talk about with recruits or even players on the team? He said, honestly, no. In this day of age, I don't know that the high school student athlete really understands the significance of that, to be honest with you.
Oh, my God.
Now, mind you, and that end quote, and now mind you, there's a sign in the stadium that says the birthplace of college football.
Literally, the identity of the program.
And literally every media guide I've ever seen, and those media guides, let's be honest, they're a recruiting pamphlet. Every single one is dedicated 2 pages to the birthplace of college football.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know. Tradition, all the other stuff, he doesn't really. I get that he's laser focused on it, but to me, that was a softball. That was a layup that he would have been able to address, and he failed on that one today.
Right. Well, it comes back to the big picture. He really hasn't had a grasp on the big picture stuff since he's been here. You could argue a lot of those things, donor relations. It's just not. He's a football coach. He's not a salesman. So I guess that's what you have. But you're right. Cratch, this would have been a really fun opportunity to create some buzz. But I think, it's It's the exact opposite. It feels like the exact opposite. And I remember those. I'll tell you, those two games, they were fun. The buzz before those games.
They were.
53,000 people in that stadium. I mean, it was incredible.
Dude, it's number 4 Michigan, okay? Like, the fans hate Harbaugh.
Yep.
They hate James Brown. I mean, like, I know the team struggled and everything, but it's like, I just feel like even then, like, you know, it's just, you're going to see it, like, the way I look at it is the kind of unspoken thing is, hey, come out to the ballpark. You're going to see one of the best teams in the country. You might get to see the national champion play.
Yep.
I mean, think about it, guys. Like, the national champion might be about to play
I will say this
on Bush campus.
I'm not, but I don't know if that's Chris Ash's job to sell that, per se. I know what you're saying. I don't know if that's his job to hype up Michigan this week. I just think that, today, and he was just he was really tight. You could tell that if the team takes the persona of the head coach, which I don't know if they always do, but, in this instance, if they do, they are going to get blown. I'm going to take back my 40-point prediction. I'm going to go 78-0 again because they were super duper tight.
All right. You guys want to make some predictions? What do you think? Is there a reason to predict?
I think Michigan wins 42-0. I think Sarge is right in a sense. I think it's going to be kind of get in, get out, let's, stay healthy and move on, survive in advance. But I don't think it's going to be I think in a perfect for Rutgers, it's like a 31-6 game or something.
Yeah,
I think it's probably going to be like 42-0. I don't see Rutgers scoring any points against the Wolverines unless it's a busted play, it's a total garbage time touchdown, or if Isaiah Pacheco runs back a kickoff or something.
You could look at my history with predictions. I don't think I've ever picked a shutout. I just always think that there will be a touchdown. It's hard to predict a shutout, but if this was ever going to be a week, I would pick a shutout. That being said, I'll go 38-7. I'll give them a touchdown. Maybe on a broken play, but
my God, 38.
Again, I just think that I think Michigan's looking at the big picture, and they are
Jim Harbaugh
not going to.
He went for 2 up. He faked an extra point last time he was here.
Yeah, but, so we did talk about it a little bit.
It was 28-0. He made 29-0.
We did talk about it in the press conference, and the 78-0. I mean, you guys agree, and maybe Rutgers fans can talk about it on Twitter, but. They did not run up that score. I defy anyone to go back and watch that. In that game, they were running the ball, like the most basic running plays into the line with their third team off. I mean, I remember, coming away, I think we said on the video, I think we talked to Chris Ash afterward, they did not run up that score. Anyone who thinks that 78-0 was a run up, it was anything but in that game.
My most memorable,
again, I just think
the most memorable moment for me was when the Rutgers band started playing this. Remember that?
I do.
I mean, that was like, wait, what song is the Rutgers band playing? Are they playing Hail to the Victors?
They were.
They were.
They were.
I just wanted a reason to play that, really. It
was a sportsmanship thing. Tim Smith, we did talk to Tim Smith. He said that they do that for every game. We just never really realized it because at that point in the game, there were 0 Rutgers fans and there were like 20,000 Michigan fans, in the stadium. So at that point in the game, we just heard it and it just sunk in. But he did say that was that's something that they always learn the opposing fight song and they'll play it as like a sportsmanship type thing.
Right. Well, at least it's a popular one.
I remember where I watched that game. It was at a restaurant in Appleton, Wisconsin, because I was with Duggan in Wisconsin because the Giants were playing. I believe so. Yeah, the Giants were playing the Packers on Sunday Night Football. That was also the night of the second 2016 presidential debate, if I remember correctly. So quite a weekend.
Quite a weekend. All right, I'm going to pick. I'm going to go 56-0. I cannot foresee a scenario where it's not a lopsided score. And then we get back to hey, look, guys, we're bringing it around full circle on this podcast. Back to the original point, which, when you talk about progress, all right, well, last year, Rutgers went to Michigan and only lost by 21, and we said, hey, that's progress. Well, this year, Rutgers went to Wisconsin and only lost by 14. It's sort of the same kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. It seems like we're in a spin cycle. Well, that's where we're at. We're get another lopsided loss here. It's going to be, hey, what's going on?
All right.
I think that's interesting because I asked Ash, I said, week 2, you went to Ohio State. You lost 52-3, non-competitive. Now this is the next elite team you're playing. The Rutgers really hasn't played an elite team since they played Ohio State. Are you going to kind of compare what you did against Ohio State and compare against Michigan? And he didn't have any interest in discussing that, but I do think that is the comparison you kind of have to make. Okay, this team got thwacked in Columbus. Now they're playing a team that might be better than the Buckeyes. How much progress have they truly made?
All right. Any final thoughts?
My final thought, and I can't believe we're burying the lead. Rutgers is indeed a field hockey school.
Oh, my gosh.
And
yes.
The fact that they are going to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 32 years, I still can't believe Steve Politi, as the host, has waited a half hour into our show to discuss this. This should have been a true and false, all 5 questions dedicated to field hockey. I kid, but in all seriousness, congratulations. They're going to the NCAA tournament. They play UConn 18-3 on Friday in Maryland. They win that game. Most likely they play Maryland. I think they might be the number 1 team in the country.
I think they are the dominant
the fact is,
program.
Big Ten champion.
Well, the fact is, we and I do it probably more than anyone. I write about the Olympic sports and just how much they've struggled. This is a great job by Coach Long. And the fact that they're, Rutgers women's soccer is more than likely going to go to the NCAA tournament, even though
they'll find out Monday afternoon.
Even though they lost, in their first Big Ten tournament game. Some good things that are happening in the fall Olympic sports besides football.
Is the men's soccer coach going to get fired?
He is. I don't believe so. He has 1 more year on his contract. Okay. And by all accounts, again, I mean, there's the weird thing is, and let's just be fair, is they lost a couple just inexplicable games at home, but they won Big Ten games. They didn't finish last in the Big Ten. I think they finished 6th in the Big Ten. So they actually showed some signs of life. By all accounts, their recruiting is still pretty good. He has another year left on his contract. I think Dan Donegan's.
And we didn't even talk about basketball. Oh my gosh, Dave's going to kill us.
Well,
the opener was on Friday. Up to you. I mean, good media day presence, a lot of optimism, a lot of not much optimism, I guess.
Okay. So to close my final thought, okay, and I'll ask the two of you this because people, Dave White's going to be playing this back, come March, Win-loss prediction, okay? Well, just give me your win total. I'm going to say 12 wins, which would be 3 or 4 games below 500.
12 would be 3 or 4 wins below 500? How many games are there?
No, that'd be
would it be 6 or 7? What, 12 and 18 then? How many games they play?
No, yeah. I think they're going to play. I think they'll play. I think they play 29 regular season games plus a conference tournament game. So, maybe 12 and 18 or something, 12 and 19, I think that would.
So you're going to the same number as me? I mean, come on, you have to go be a little bit more original.
You know what? I'm going to go under. Someone asked me online. I think I put the over under at 10.5. I'll say 10.
Are we okay with 10? Are we okay with 10 and 12? I'm going to go 15. I'm going to set the bar a little higher. I have no idea.
Whoa.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Wrestling had a big start too. This has now become the other Rutgers sports. And I will say real quick though, Meredith Civico, very impressive job with the field hockey program. I think from what I understand, there's a good chance they beat UConn. Maryland probably is a bridge too far at this point, but I think there's a very strong case to make that she is the next in the line of the builders at Rutgers that kind of build a program from nowhere to a position of national prominence of some sort. I think they're kind of on that path. And Gianna Glatz, the goalkeeper, in my opinion, has been the best athlete at Rutgers.
You are deep in the weeds. I love it. All right, Gianna Glatz, get the shutout in stores. I think that's a good place to stop. All right, I'm going to sign off this week. We'll be back to talk about the Michigan game.